term critical race theory. Can you define what that is? I can't wrap my head around it.
Well, I'm not so sure that I understand it myself. It was a theory that was created by Kimberly Crenshaw, a UCLA law school professor. And basically it talks about structural racism, about how institutions are created. Were really put, in the old days, to put black people in a very disadvantaged position. I mean, a good example would be in the South, after the Civil War, you can't go wandering around in the streets. And you go wandering around in the streets and you act like a vagrant, you're gonna be hauled in jail. You get put into jail, you can't meet bond, you will continue to be in jail. I can also cite a recent example where the work that I did during the last 12 years in philanthropy, in Alabama, the sheriff would just cite African Americans for any kind of silly excuse, like a broken taillight. And then they would put them into jail. But then they could not pay the fine. If they can't pay the fine, they just stayed in jail. It would go on and on and on like that. And but there are many manifestations of institutional racism where the cards are stacked against you. Now, having said that, they do not teach critical race theory in K-12 education because it's a very theoretical college subject. So all these parents who are talking about critical race theory being taught at K-12 school is just not even true. It's not, and you know, the teachers in this room know that we have every state has a state framework, a curriculum. Critical race theory is not in the state mandated curriculum. So it's just another one of these cultural war issues that people are raising because they don't like Black Lives Matter. They don't like people raising issues about institutional racism, so on and so forth.
No, I totally understand that example you gave about wishing you were white. Because I grew up in a town when I was young, and I was one of the few Asians there. And you don't want to stand out. You don't want to stand out. And I've had an incident when I was in elementary school when I was called a dumb Chinaman in class in front of the whole third grade class. So those are things that you kind of carry with you as an adult. Because even now, in some situations where it's primarily all white, then you feel you get a little extra look here and there, and you're just not one of the, you're just not like everybody else. So it's something that I've never forgotten, and you know, I still remember these things.
Yeah, unfortunately that's a very common experience for a lot of Asians. And it's particularly true because, you know, our community is still comprised of 2/3 immigrants. I mean, that's why we have 20 million Asian Americans in the United States. You know, the growth in our population is a result of this steady immigration, and many don't speak English well, or their parents don't speak English well. They're embarrassed that their parents don't speak well, and they're made fun of at school, right? And it does leave a mark on your psyche, and you don't forget it. Now, you know, I don't know if my experience is kind of an exception, but when our family moved into Stockton, and I had that second grade African-American teacher, Mrs. Bridges, when February came rolling around, she asked my mom and dad to cook a Chinese New Year's lunch, which my parents did, and it was a very reaffirming kind of experience for the whole class. So I said, oh, that's just how you do things, right? And when I was growing up in Stockton, I can't remember if I was called a name, maybe once, where kids used to say Ching Chong Chinaman, where they were singing a song, but they were just singing it. But I never, I guess, even though we were poor, everyone else was poor in our neighborhood, whether they were white, black, or Chicano. So growing up, I have to say, I never had an inferiority complex. And in a way, I think that maybe served me well, because I guess I never felt intimidated by whites. I don't think I felt intimidated by whites. It was only when I went to college, it wasn't that I was intimidated by whites in college, but I was just shocked how rich, you know, some whites can be. I mean, when I went to Stanford on scholarship, I didn't even know that there was such thing as private schools, you know. But you know, half of the class at Stanford went to private schools in the East Coast or someplace, or Punahou in Hawaii.
Thanks for being here, by the way. I think people here know me pretty well. In the 50s, when I was growing up, when I was young, I did that too. I sang that thing. I didn't know any better. I heard it, I repeated it, didn't know. I think the last 18 months, let me start with this. My stepmom called me up in December, last December, to say that she was scared to go out on the street. She's black. I'm scared to go out on the street because of everything that's happening. So I talked to her for a while and I said, you know what, Mom? I'm gonna give you a positive from all this. And I think it applies to all the hate crimes that have been going on. I said, our former president has made it okay to come out of the closet and hate. I said, you're not seeing anything that wasn't there already. What you're seeing is people feeling comfortable exposing themselves for who they are and how they think. And I said that if you want to think of a positive, remember this now. At least we know who they are, because they're standing up to be counted. Not in a good way, but they're standing up to be counted. They're exposing themselves for how they think and who they are. And I think that Trump especially has reached out. You said in Stockton, the poor white community. Not a very positive comment or label to put on it, but poor white trash is something we've heard. And for some reason, in large numbers in the South, they've stood up and supported Trump and spoken out in some pretty nasty ways. So, you know, as bad as things are, at least we can identify a lot of people now.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it is painful. And it's something that we have to kind of grapple with in a lot of different situations. You know, I know that, you know, I belong to a Facebook group with my graduating class in Stockton. And I can tell, you know, by comments on Facebook that, you know, it's pretty rough. You know, these attitudes that some of my classmates have, you know, it runs pretty deep. You know, they, you know, whether it's about masking or about the vaccine or about, oh, our government is falling apart. I mean, it's kind of astounding. So you have to pick and choose your battle and find the right time to kind of address these issues. And that is a challenge because it doesn't go away. In fact, and I don't mean to be political, and I'm trying not to be political, but right now I'm happening to read a book about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I don't know if you know him, or you probably all church folks know him, right? But what I found about this book that I'm reading is really the parallel between what happened 4 years ago and even now to Hitler Germany, where Germans really had this wish for a very strong authoritarian leader and sort of cultural purity, that somehow or another Germany is going to be great again. And it's very unnerving, very, very unnerving, where the German church really tried to get rid of Jews. Jews had converted to Christianity, and the Nuremberg laws, right, said you're out. Even though you've converted to Christianity, because of your Jewish background, you're out. So we have elements in this country where we are fighting these cultural issues.